Hey guys, Paul here. So today I wanted to talk about trap cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! And why I think that they get a bit of an undeserved bad reputation in this game, in this community at least. And so the context for this, I suppose, is that at the Yu-Gi-Oh! German National Championship this past weekend, a Labyrinth deck won first place against a Cashdare deck in the finals, and in the last game, the Labyrinth player went first, set up Eradicator Epidemic Virus, called spells, and just took 5 spells out of the Cashdare player's hand along with the monster that he had. And that was the handshake right there. It ended up winning. I thought it was a pretty cool moment, but it certainly reminded me that a lot of people do not like trap cards in this game. So some people thought this was just like a funny moment and a nice victory, and other people, just were like, okay, Eradicator needs to be banned. And I'm not exactly going to talk about Eradicator Epidemic Virus specifically in this video, although we might touch on it, but more so just the fact that trap decks really do kind of have a bad reputation in this game, and they're sometimes seen as like the villain deck. And historically, this has always been the case, it feels like. Right now, you could say that Labyrinth is kind of the premier trap deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! But this has happened, like I said, for a long time. You think of maybe a deck like Eldritch, it got a really bad rap. There are things like Altergeist that got a really bad rap, Subterror Guru Control. Anytime that there's just a deck that utilizes a lot of trap cards, people don't like it. And to be fair, I think that there's some great reasons why. Trap cards oftentimes, counter your moves, they prohibit what you can do, and they can be just really difficult to deal with when there's a lot of trap cards on the field. There's the obvious stuff that people don't like floodgates, your skill drains, your there can be only one, your rivalries, your macrocosmos, whatever said card is, along with just, things that can outright negate stuff, solemn judgments, and those sorts of counter traps, plus just the general disruption cards, dogmatic of punishment, compulsory evacuation device, ice dragon's prison, just different things like that. And there are a few traps that people have wanted banned, honestly. That's where Evenly Matched comes into the picture, although I feel like it barely really counts as a trap card. But even stuff like Dimensional Barrier and, of course, Eradicator Epidemic Virus. So, yeah, trap cards can be obnoxious, but I always feel that them getting a bad reputation makes little sense to me when it seems like everything in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just as powerful, if not more so, than trap cards. So let's take combo decks, for instance. Combo decks they get a bad rep too. A lot of people don't like, kind of the modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Combo deck where the turn takes a really long time and it ends on an unbreakable board, or at least a board full of enough disruptions and kind of interruptions and some negations or whatever protections so that you can't really play the game. Conversely, I think that trap decks are actually, in some cases at least, more interactable than those things are. Like, for instance, if your opponent ends on, a board with Baronne de Fleur, a board with Borreload Savage, or Boral End Dragon that can just negate things, boards with things like Abyss Dweller that are walking floodgates, it feels a little weird that trap decks, for some reason, can't do that, because if they do that, it's seen as, like, bad or worse or just more obnoxious for some reason, when there are plenty of counterplays to trap cards, just like there are plenty of counterplays to combo decks. So I feel like they should be even in that regard. In fact, we can kind of go one-to-one, right? So there are floodgate traps, like there can be only one, and skill drain, but there are also floodgate monsters. Historically, we've had a few floodgate monsters that have gotten banned, like, VFD comes to mind, or Arch Nemesis Protoss, those sorts of things. But also, there are like just things like Abyss Dweller that can just linger on the field, or Cashdare Riseheart that's just like a walking macrocosmos. When it's in the form of a monster, it can sometimes be even more obnoxious because the monster has stats and the monster can attack you, whereas like a floodgate can't attack you. And same thing with Omni Negates, right? Just as annoying as, a Solemn Judgment, Warning, Strike, that sort of card is, so too, what I say is a Baronne or something else that doesn't Omni-Negate. And we know that there are plenty of those in Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now. And then last but not least, just the general disruption traps. So if you want to compare, like, say, a Compulse or, Dogmatic of Punishment to anything in the game today, like Mirror Jade or whatever, that can just kind of quick effect banish your cards, quick effect send stuff to grave. Sometimes these things don't target. It feels like it's what and what. So I think a lot of what it comes down to for people is that there's this perception that trap cards take less skill, and I see how people can think that probably from the outside looking in. As somebody who does not actually like playing against trap decks any more than anyone else does, trust me, like I'm not, sitting here just defending them. They're annoying for sure. And I see how it can look really like it looks bad because, your opponent's just flipping these traps. You feel like as a combo deck player or even as a mid-range deck player, you're doing all the work, right? You're making decisions, you have to memorize these combo lines, and this trap player just gets to flip up their floodgate, and it just stops you in your tracks. They flip up their, disruption and just pop all your cards or whatever, and they didn't have to try for it, and it was very easy. But I actually would argue that trap cards in today's game feel surprisingly, they're doing construction outside, just ignore it. Hopefully it doesn't last long. But trap cards today are they take a lot of effort and like decision making if you want to win with them, because traps, if once they're wasted, they're gone. So whereas a monster can get a negation, it's still a monster. If you waste a Dogmatica punishment, if you waste a compulsory evacuation device, if you waste any sort of removal, even like a solemn card, it's gone. And if it's the wrong thing, then your opposing combo deck can just keep playing and you're out of a resource. This is actually a lot of the reason why trap decks have to kind of go for quantity over quality when it comes to trap cards. It's why a card like, Pot of Extravagance is more useful for a trap deck than, say, Pot of Prosperity. Because at least with trap cards, the more that you have, the more chances you can just stop your opponent outright. But when you waste those traps, it sucks. Another thing that I think kind of oftentimes gets forgotten about in this is there are a lot of people who are like, okay, bring back Red Reboot because it was a good way to, stop trap cards. But I actually think that Red Reboot was just like too far in making trap decks unplayable. I feel like that's probably why Konami banned it, at least in the TCG. There's already a lot that trap decks have to contend with. Evenly Matched shuts out trap decks. Lightning Storm, Harpy's Feather Duster, which is, legal these days for whatever reason. All these cards can just really kind of wipe trap decks out like immediately, right? Like sometimes, if your opponent sets 4 or 5 cards, maybe they have a Solemn Judgment to counter it, maybe they don't. And if they don't, then it's just kind of a blowout when you have several different cards in this game that can all just wipe away back row like blink of an eye, right? So I think that what still remains as like a reason why trap decks are seen as the bad guy, I think maybe it's because they slow the game down. Maybe it's because, the turns feel like they're just waiting for you to do stuff and react. But then it's weird to me because people don't like the modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Long turn stuff, and trap decks actually don't take as long. That's the thing. Like if a modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck, tries to play, right, a combo turn is going to take like 5 minutes. And lots of shuffling, lots of searching, lots of special summoning. Even when you hand trap them, they can still usually play right through it. Trap decks are pretty easy, at least, They set a few cards, and that's usually, you kind of call it a day. So I think that in that way, they're saving time. And then also, there's counterplay against them. And then also, the way that they're stopping your plays is not really any different than the way that your average inboard of monsters would stop plays. So, I don't know. I guess this is just one of those things in Yu-Gi-Oh! That I think will always probably be this way. It's weird because, one last thing, Kashtera lost this. And there's some people who are cheering that on, but Kashtera lost this, and people are complaining that, maybe Eradicator needs to get banned, which I don't really agree with. I think it's pretty situational. It can be like, super high reward, but also not that many decks can use it, and blah, blah, blah. But it's strange because it's like, Kashtera is typically the bad guy deck. And yet, when it loses to something like this, it feels unfair. But like also Kashtera have a Rise Heart, and they can hit your extra deck. And, just a few months ago, a month ago, could like zone lock you. It's weird, I guess, like people sort of turn table whenever a deck has to face a trap deck suddenly. Then like combo decks are the protagonists, and it's a whole thing. I don't know. And historically in Yu-Gi-Oh! Like events, trap decks rarely actually end up being the deck that like takes the first place win. Sure that, there are plenty of trap decks that can, get in the top cut of events. But if you look at, just Yu-Gi-Oh! Results through the ages, I'm not talking about just this year or last year, I'm talking about historically, it's almost always, the beatdown deck, not the control deck, that ends up winning at the end of the day. The strong combo deck with lots and lots and lots of options, lots of powerful monsters, lots of consistent strategies. And the trap decks usually make it to perhaps top 4, perhaps top 8, whatever, but they oftentimes don't quite take it home. So, yeah, just something to think about. I know that I'm kind of biased, I suppose. I mean, I like the Labyrinth deck. That's one of the decks I play. But I also have not played very many trap decks historically. I skipped out on Eldritch and Altergeist and Guru Control because I'm not really that into actually the setting trap cards and flipping all of them thing. Labyrinth spoke to me, I think, more so because it just feels like a more aggressive take on a trap deck. So I don't know, you can call that what you will. Everyone draws their line somewhere different. Anyways, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. How do you feel about trap cards? How do you feel about, ones that you think need to get banned? Do you think that, people playing the purple cards are any worse than the people playing the combo decks? Where do you land on such a debate? I'd like to know. Anyways, be sure that you subscribe over here on APS Amplifier. We'd love to get to 100,000 subscribers this year. Please, please help us out. And follow me over on Twitter where you can talk to me about this as well, or in the comments, or whatever. All right, it's going to be it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Pass turn.